All right, now let me switch over to Adobe Illustrator. And this is your starting screen. And again, like I said, we're just going to kind of look at some different tools and some different ideas for creating logos, different ways. I mentioned before, like I am not a graphic designer. I am not very artistic when it comes to drawing or anything like that. I can barely draw stick figures. So Illustrator is a program that helps me tremendously come up with graphics because it's got lots of tools that you can sort of trick your way into creating a kind of neat looking logo. From here, I'm going to go ahead and just click Create New. And you'll see across the top, if you've got a certain size that you're going for, you can look at different mobile layouts. So if you're creating designs for phone screens, if you're working in app development or anything like that, different web pages that you can sort of use these templates to mock up what you want a web page to look like. Print, this is typically what I'm dealing with a lot here in the library. Film and video as well. These are very helpful functions for if you are doing some video editing or maybe putting together a video tutorial and you want to create a title slide. These are some good setups here that you can create a graphic in Illustrator and then just insert that into your video. And some different art and illustration logos here, or not logos, sorry. What am I trying to say? The presets, the word that's right here in front of me. So different presets that you can select there. I'm just going to go back to recent and those will show up. But over here at the side, you can also just determine what size you want to use. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and give this a name, and I'm just going to call this logo practice. You can change the dimensions that you're working with. I will say that if you are working with logos, it may be best to work in pixels so that if you are submitting something to a website or especially you can get things printed onto like little business cards or flash drives or things like that. They may have a pixel by pixel dimension that you want to shoot for or that's a recommended size for them. So you can do that. I am just going to switch to inches because this is kind of how my brain works most of the time. And I'm just going to make this a letter size page. So I'm just going to do 8.5 by 11. Let me do that. And you can see right next to this, you can change the orientation, which basically just flips what's in these two boxes here. So it just does that for you. But I'm just going to do a landscape size, or sorry, a letter size landscape page, and then just sort of create some different types of logos here. The color modes down here at the bottom, I don't typically alter these unless you know that you need to work in a specific color mode if you need to switch to RGB. CMYK is basically your print preset, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which most professional printers use. They use those colors to mix everything else. And then I just leave it on high and then the default preview. So basically in this window, just set your size and you can give it a name at the top here and then click create. All right. The first thing that I am going to do, because I'm sort of stuck in my old ways and haven't adapted to the new way they've laid everything out in the new Illustrator versions. In this version, and it is fine to work in this, you've got your toolbar over here at the left-hand side. You've got properties, layers, and libraries, which this will be connected to my Creative Cloud account, and so I can see different things that I've worked on here. But you can change this workspace with this little icon here at the top. And so this is the new Essentials workspace. I'm going to switch this to Essentials Classic. And this is going to take me to kind of my old school way of looking at things, where I have my different panels at the side. I've got color guides. These are helpful for creating a different color palette or giving you some suggestions of what colors go with what. Swatches, these are very important. I'll be using these throughout. Brushes and symbols, not be using symbols as much. And then you've got things like your stroke, which is the outline of a shape, your gradient and your transparency options. And then getting into things like appearance and graphic styles and down into layers. I have not done much with this asset export here. but you'll have those at the side. You can also pull these out and close them. So if you're working with the color palette over here and then you want this to get out of your way and you click close here, you can find all of these palettes under your window menu. So one that I like to use a lot and we will use in this workshop is the Pathfinder. You can click and open that up. I could also add this to the side over here so I get some extra little tools. Or you can go up to the top, and if you're missing something from this screen, you can click here and choose Reset Essentials Classic, and we'll go back to the saved workspace so it brings back the color. It also gets rid of the Pathfinder, which will bring that back a little bit later. All right. So to get started, I want to jump just straight into drawing some shapes. And you'll notice that you've got a rectangle here on this toolbar. And if I click and hold that down, anything that has a little arrow next to it means that there are more tools sort of hidden underneath or grouped together with that top tool there. And so you can click and hold, and it will, and I believe you can also right click, yeah, and open that up. And I'm going to choose the ellipse tool. So we're just going to start with a circle. Now with the ellipse tool, if I click and drag, this gives me just an oval shape. And if I try to click to move that or change the size of it, so if I try to move it again, I end up getting another oval. So one of the things that I always recommend to people, and it's a hard habit to get used to, and I still sometimes don't quite make it work, is that you want to go back. So we selected this ellipse tool, but if I go back, I can select this selection tool. And this black arrow is sort of like home base. After you create something, you want to go back to this selection tool. So then I can click and drag it. I can select something else. I can click and drag with the selection tool to select two things at once. So this is the tool that lets you come in here and I can resize things. I can rotate things using these handles here. So this is the tool that you always want to come back to so that you can move your shapes around. Now for this, I'm going to click and drag and select both of these and just press delete on my keyboard. I want to show you that with the ellipse tool, if you hold down the shift key on your keyboard and click and drag, this will make a complete circle. So I'll go, this is about 2.5 inches. So holding shift will do that with the circle or the ellipse tool. It will make a circle. Same thing with the rectangle tool and really any of these tools. It just keeps things in proportion. So this would make a square. I'll do the same size here. And again, go back to my selection tool and I can just click and move that over. And I may use this, so I'll just leave it over there at the side. Actually, I'm going to delete it so it doesn't get in the way. So with this circle here, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit if I can figure out my settings. I'm on a Mac, which I'm not quite used to. And get this situated here. So when we created that circle, it automatically had, just since this is the first time opening Illustrator, it just filled it in with a white fill and gave it a black stroke. And over here on the toolbar, you can see the two colors here. So this is the white fill, it's this solid square. And then the stroke is kind of this square with a hole in the middle. And that's telling us what color the outline or the stroke is. I can turn off the stroke. So down here at the bottom, I can switch between a solid color, a gradient, or none. So I can select one of those and I'll select the stroke here and do none. Now, it's a little bit worrisome when you choose to have a white shape without an outline. If I click away from it, you'll see that it sort of disappears entirely. However, if I mouse over it, you're able to detect any sort of path, which is sort of what we created or is what we created here. So you can mouse over it and it will show you that you're hovering over a shape. The one slight difference, and I'd like to mention this just in case it happens to you, if you have no fill and no stroke, you still have a path there. And actually, I think it's doing a lot better than it used to in the past. It used to be that you had to mouse right over the path, but if you went past it, it would sort of see through the shape and not really highlight it. But it seems to be a little bit better now. But you can always mouse over and select that. So again, right now, maybe I didn't. There we go. So now I think I didn't select none. So now it has no fill, no stroke. And so if I mouse over the middle, I can't see it, but if I go right over the edge, if I finally get to it right there, then I can select it and add a color back to it. Just something to think about if you get in that situation where you have, and the one that I think of constantly is the line tool. It by default has no fill, no stroke. It just gives you a line. So if you'll draw a line and then click away from it, you have to sort of hunt it down and sort of find out where it is. But anyway, just a little word of warning there. But now that I have it selected, I can click back to my selection tool, and I'm going to go to my swatches palette. And we're going to start with the very simple logo. This is just going to be sort of like the MasterCard logo with two circles overlapping, kind of like a Venn diagram. And I'm going to show you that I'm going to select sort of a reddish color, and I'm not certain exactly which colors they use, but I'm just going to go with this kind of red. And I'm going to use the selection tool, and there's a great shortcut, and this is the Alt key on your keyboard, or on a Mac, it is your Option key. Now this is the same as copying and pasting, so I could copy this circle and paste it and then just move it over to the side. However, as a way to kind of make this a little bit easier, all of these Adobe programs, if you hold down Alt or Option, you get this little double arrow, and this will let me just click and drag another circle over. Now, of course, they're both the same color, so you can't really see the difference. But if I mouse over the other circle, you can see that one's there and this one's here. And I'm just going to, while I have it selected, and again, with your selection tool, you can select back and forth. And with this one, I'm just going to choose kind of an orange color. I think I did a little bit lighter like that. And now we've got these two circles overlapping. But if you notice, on the logo, I could hold down. Oh, this is another good thing. So talking about the arrangement here. So if I want to bring the red circle to the front, I can use my selection tool. No, sorry, the object menu here at the top, arrange and bring to front. And that will bring the red circle on top of the orange circle. Same thing, if I wanted to send it back, I could go to object, arrange, and send to back. And really with this, it doesn't matter which is on top because we're going to change what's known as a blending mode. So how these two interact with each other. Because in the MasterCard logo, this little center part here is like a Venn diagram. So it's the blend of these two colors. And to do that very easily, you can click on one of these circles, whichever one is on top. And over here at the side past, so we talked about the stroke gradient and transparency here. This is where we have the circle. Now I could start doing something like making it transparent and you get that bleed through, but now we have this problem where the yellow is turning more light, so it's the white is showing through. So that's not what we want to do. We want to keep that full or at 100%. And then what we can do is play with these different blending modes. And I always encourage people to just, if you're starting from scratch and working with some different shapes, just kind of play with these. And I still don't really have a solid definition in my brain about what each of these do. But if I choose something like darken, you can see that it's okay. It's not great. So it's doing something here, but not a whole lot. The one in prepping for this workshop that I found worked the best is the color burn. There we go. So I think I had a darker red selected than I did in my practice session here. But now you can see that what this is doing is it's not changing the color of the orange that I used, but the red, which is probably what the problem was, is it's kind of an orange, more of a burnt orange. Now when they overlap, it leaves this color alone, but when the two interact right here in the middle, we then get that sort of blend together. Some other things like exclusion, these are some things to play with, that these, when they do more of a harsh kind of blend, obviously, as you can see there. Hue kind of tints them a little bit. Color kind of does the same. But I think this color dodge is pretty good. And one of the interesting little effects that sort of happens in my brain, I don't know if it happens with everybody else, is that now it's kind of hard to really distinguish which is on top of the other. So is it sort of a transparent red disc on top of a orange disc, or is it a transparent orange disc on top of a red disc? And you can kind of make it bounce back and forth in your brain about which one is on top there. Now, I want to introduce a different concept to this, and this is fine. So if we're working in Illustrator and we want to pull this through and we're going to use all Adobe products when we're putting this logo in, it's fine to leave it like this because the Adobe products know how to read this transparency. However, if we're sending this to print, really what we want is we want to send a logo that is actually 3 different shapes as opposed to these 2 overlapping shapes. And so what I mean by that is we would have this sort of like crescent moon shaped red piece, a sort of leaf shaped lighter orange piece, and then a yellowish crescent moon on this side. And to do that, what we can do is we can select both of these shapes, and this is where the pathfinder comes into play. And that again, so it's not in this essentials palette, it's under the window menu and then pathfinder. This is the tool, and I'm going to dock it over here so that we have it for future reference. So this pathfinder, these 2 overlapping shapes here, they've got different modes. So I could either unite these together and then we'd have sort of a figure 8 shape, and I'll just click on it just to show you what that would do. So that would blend them together, kind of make a little peanut there. But if I do Command Z, or Control Z, I can undo that. There's minus front, which will cut out a shape, so then we get a little crescent moon, which is something that we'll do a little bit later. The intersect will look at just what's overlapping there. And then the opposite is this exclude, where then it cuts out the middle shape and then leaves us the 2 outside shapes. But really what I want to do is down here at the bottom, and these do different things. The main one that I'm going to focus on is just this divide here. So I'm going to click on divide, and what that does is splits everything along their path. So now we have 3 different shapes. And if I right click and do, let me click on it and then right click and say ungroup, then I can select these shapes and pull them apart into different pieces here. And actually it does, I discovered this the other day, it actually makes 2 pieces here in the middle that are overlapping. Now I'm going to do Control Z or Command Z to just bring those back together and even group them again. And what I want to do is I want to go to, and this is a new thing that I've kind of discovered in making this a little bit easier, is that I can go to Object and then Flatten Transparency. And what it's going to do is make this shape in the middle that actual color. So instead of it being a blend of the 2 colors, this will go in and flatten that. And I'll choose high resolution just to keep it high quality here and click OK. And now what we should see if we select it, right click and ungroup, is I can pull, if I click away, I can then pull these pieces. And so now you'll notice that this piece is actually the orange color that we need here. So if I get that back in the center. So now we've got 3 separate pieces, the red, the yellow, and the orange, but it's not transparent anymore. It's actually set as that color. All right. Any questions there? All right. Another thing to look at while we're looking at this Pathfinder, and I sort of did this just because we have this sort of leaf shape left over, and so I'm going to move away from the MasterCard logo and create a little sort of flower logo that I just kind of made up based on some logo ideas that I found online. So I'm going to take this leaf, or we'll call it a petal now, that I will rotate it on its side. So we'll sort of start here. Also, while you're rotating, if you hold shift, it will keep things it'll rotate it at 45-degree increments, so you can do from horizontal to vertical pretty easily there. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use the, let me get that out of the way, my rotate tool. And so just like before, we could go in and I could use my selection tool. I could hold down um, Alt or Option and make another copy and try to rotate it and get it lined up. And it would work fine. It just is a lot more effort than this other tool. But you could sort of do this and like keep going around. But I'm going to show you if you use your rotate tool, that's this little arrow here, you can set a anchor point. So I can select this little middle part right here. Then I move to the shape. Again, I'm going to hold down Alt to make a duplicate copy of this and start rotating. And you'll see that it rotates around that anchor point. And I'm going to go, and I think I did, let's do 45 degrees, make it a little bit less complicated. So I rotated 45 degrees and I'll let go here. And there's a great shortcut. So if you go to Object and Transform, this is another way that you can rotate things. So I could select a shape, I could tell it to rotate, I could tell it where the axis is, those sorts of things. And it's a neat little box. So if I did transform each, I'll just show you this box. So it lets me do things like change the scale of a shape, move it. So if you want to move it a certain number of inches away from where you were, rotation, and then you can make copies. So this is a cool little box here, but it'll also remember that we just did it on the page itself. And that other option under Object Transform, Transform again, you'll notice is Command D or Control D. So if I just do Command D a couple more times, it will remember that we moved it 45 degrees and then made a copy. And so it'll do it again. It'll rotate it 45 degrees, make a copy. Same thing here and same thing here. So we get this kind of little flowered shape here. And then I'm going to go in and just change the colors here. So if I go back into my swatches, I'm going to click one and I'm going to use these blues here. So I'm just going to kind of step up through these different shades of blue. So we get something kind of like that. And then again, we can select all of these. So I'm using my selection tool and just clicking and dragging to select all of these. Go back to my blend modes, and then we can really see what some of these do. So if I do color dodge again, and it's sometimes easier if I click away, you can see that we get some different shades kind of in between. I'm going to select them again and change them to, and I can't remember which one I used here. I think I did you maybe. So then you get these little alternate shapes here. Difference is not going to be very good, or maybe even multiply will kind of give you the shapes there. And also, if you want more difference, you can then come in. And so I could skip one of the blues here. So if I go back to my swatches and maybe make this, that blue, this one. So get just a little bit more variation in our colors. And again, this is where I just sort of say you can play with this and see what you like. Again, I could maybe bring this one to the front if I want to have the color here. So if I think this will work. If I arrange and bring to front. There we go. So I did a color burn on that one and made it change a little bit. But again, just kind of ways to play with this, to use these transparency options to get some different shapes out of this. And once we do that, again, we can do the same thing. So with our Pathfinder tool, I can come in and I can divide this into pieces. So then it will split along all of these lines here. And something I did with this one is I flattened the transparency, so it made these the colors that I'm seeing now as opposed to a blend of different colors. So I can flatten the transparency. I'll click OK there. And then I can do a thing where if I select it and right click, I can ungroup this, and you can pull out different pieces. If I click away from it first, I could then pull out these pieces in the middle, and so then we get sort of a different little look there. And I'll probably select these and also right click and group them again just to make sure that they stay together. Oh, let me undo that. And so then you can decide, I don't know if you want to do anything with these pieces down here, but you could sort of align those and have a different logo altogether. So again, these tools, just sort of playing with these, I just like overlaying shapes. Another very quick one just to mention, because I'm going to jump into some more circles, is like doing a cloud. So if I grab my ellipse tool and I just make a couple of, let me change it to green so it's more of a cloud. Swatches, here we go. And I'll just do kind of a blue. And so even if I just use the circle and hold down Alt and just make a couple of circles here. So just overlapping circles like this, I can select these and then with my Pathfinder, blend those together. And then I have a little cloud shape. It's just very easy. And I remember first being kind of petrified of Illustrator because I didn't understand drawing at all. But then when I realized, oh, we can just make shapes and blend those together, it became one of my favorite programs, especially starting from scratch and working with something. Certainly working with pictures and that sort of imagery, Photoshop is better. But I originally had done everything in Photoshop and was scared of Illustrator, but then started falling in love with it. Just going to group these, move those over here. All right. Now, speaking of that, so I'm going to move kind of down here into this quadrant of my page here and talk about just text. So working with text in Illustrator. So the text tool, I also like working with text quite a bit because I can just click with my text tool, click on the page. It gives me this lorem ipsum text. And this is basically just so that you can start playing with your font immediately if you want to, or you can type what you want. So if I wanted to do Thomas LaFaux here, you can hold down Shift and click and drag your text. So this is a very easy way to make it larger. You can see that it is actually changing the point size over here. But something that I like about Illustrator is that you can just make it whatever size looks right to you. So again, holding Shift, you can click and drag and just scale it to whatever size you want. You can also, and I don't advise it 100%, but if you do want a slightly different look from this, you can actually just stretch the text a little bit more. So if you just wanted kind of a wider font, but not necessarily taller, you could do that. You could also make it a little bit taller just by clicking and dragging here. Now this, of course, is just a complete don't do it if you're dealing with images. So you don't ever want to really stretch an image to fit where you want it. But sometimes when working with logos, you can just do this with your text and just kind of make this fit the way you want it to look in your logo. Since again, that's going to be used more as an image anyway and not typed. However, if you do stretch it and do things like that, it is quite difficult to get it back to where it was. There's no magic button to do that, as opposed to you could just do undo. So I could maybe undo to get back here. I think that's the right size. There we go. So again, Shift, click and drag from the corner, and it will scale it. If you don't hold Shift, you can then stretch it and sort of manipulate it the way you want to. Now I'm going to click on this and grab my selection tool again and hold down Option. I'm just going to click and drag this down and maybe change this to, what did I do last time? I did maybe light. And so I changed the text here. So if we wanted to do something like Research Associates, if I had a company named for myself. And then again, just kind of playing around with the text. I may want it to just cover up to the A here, so I can just click and drag this over and have that kind of right underneath. And what I want to do with this, and I'm going to kind of select those and move them a little bit. I'm going to do kind of a little oval shape over this. And what I'm going to do, so I could just put this in an oval. I could grab my ellipse tool. I could click and drag. It's black right now, but I can change that. So with that selected, again, I always try to remember to go back to that selection tool before changing the fill and the stroke. Again, another place where you can do that, notice that here when I have the fill on top and I click through different colors here, it changes the fill. If the stroke is on top and I start clicking through colors, it's going to change the color of the stroke around it. So make sure, and it happens to me, I mean, several times a day if I'm working in Illustrator, I'll forget to look which one is on top and just start picking colors. But you can take the stroke off by using the little slash here. I can then click back to the fill and then select a different color. So if I want kind of a purple here. Also, if you want to switch those, so if I click there and tell it none for the stroke and click here for the, or sorry, none for the fill, click on the stroke and click on a purple, then I get a little purple oval around this. So you could do something easy like that. Your stroke is something you can control here with the stroke option. So your weight, you can increase the weight of this. So if you want kind of a big bold line around that, you can do that. If you click the little expand option here, this will expand this and show you some more options. And the stroke, you can do several things with it. You can align it to, right now you'll see it's on the center of that oval. I can push it to the inside, I can push it to the outside. That's not hugely important unless you're really concerned about the size or you're trying to fit it into a space. But again, if you're kind of still in the design stage, you can play around with it and see what you want there. You can also turn this into a dashed line, so it will create that effect there. This is also helpful for if you're doing a brochure and you want to do the little dotted line where they can cut along an edge. Very helpful. You can go kind of crazy with this dash, so you can change how the spacing in between. So if I want less of a gap here, I could change this to maybe 24 points. You can see I get longer gaps here, or sorry, longer dashes. And then I could also shorten the gap. So I could tell this 12 for the gap, and then we get closer here. And then you could go crazy again and do 12 for the dash, and then you get these kind of stuttered dash lines. So lots of things that you can do. Again, and you can just uncheck it and go back to this. I'm going to wait on the brushes. We'll come back to the brushes. But what I want to do with this is, so this is one way, just putting an oval around something is perfectly fine for logo making. But you can also, if I use my Pathfinder, what I want to do is, if I want to do, instead of an oval around the whole thing, if I just wanted to do maybe sort of a half oval kind of going around the edge here, I'm going to click and drag this up. So I'm kind of looking at where it starts right here and where it ends over here, kind of below associates. And I'm going to make a copy. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key or my Option key and just bring this down. And what I'm doing with these two, it's very similar to when we were looking at the, I'm going to drag it up here, when we were looking at this logo here where we ended up with the two little moon shapes. If I come back down, what I'm looking at is this outside sort of swoosh here. If I click on one, or you can click and drag to select both, I'm going to use the Pathfinder, and I'm going to, I think I can do minus front here. Yeah. So then this gives me, again, the stroke kind of makes it look a little bit weird at the ends here. So if I reduce that stroke a little bit, it gets a little bit better. Or if I just take the stroke off completely, I can set that to 0. And then change the fill to that purple. We get kind of a little effect like that, where you get just very simple design that's, and I'm just rotating it a little bit to kind of match it up where I want it. So kind of a text-based logo with just a little accent in there. Kind of get it close together. And I will take a second to mention there's another selection tool, and this is the direct selection tool, which is this white arrow. And what this will do is I can actually come in and manipulate this path. So we sort of started with this curve that it gave us. And you can see the little anchor points along the way. So it's got a little anchor point and then it's drawing a curved line to this next anchor point and then down to the point and then back. So I could click, and if I wanted to select this one anchor point here and maybe adjust it and just get kind of a different sort of feel here or make it a little bit thinner. I'm not the best at this, but you can kind of play with it and see, and I can adjust these handles. These are the how the line approaches and leaves that little anchor point there. So I could make it sort of really thin right here. I don't know that I like that very much, but we can kind of play around with it and see what we can get. I don't like that at all. So I'm just going to undo all of that and just go back to where we started. And so maybe where I started, one of those, if I just did it just a little bit and didn't go too far with it, maybe that would be fine. But again, that's the difference between those. So again, your selection tool selects the whole shape, and then the direct selection tool, you can come in and you can even do things like select anchor point and delete it. And this would not be a good example of that, but maybe if I deleted the endpoint over here, then we get sort of this weird sort of cutoff shape here, just by selecting those anchor points and deleting them or moving them around. Now, I want to kind of wrap up just talking about using just text in general. So we've looked at the different shapes and those tools that you can use. But if I grab my text tool, I'm going to use this Open Sans. I don't know that this is the exact font well, I'm pretty certain it's not the exact font that they used. But I'm going to start with just an H. So I'm going to grab this H here and just make it bigger. And then I'm going to make a copy of it. So I can just hold down, just like with your shapes, you can just hold down your Alt key and drag this over. And I'm going to make this a lowercase I. And what I'm going to do is I want to, so basically the logo looks like this. So if I have the H and then the I is actually a red color, and that's just kind of right on top. And this is their logo, which is kind of indicative of a tractor. You've got two tires here on the side and kind of your smokestack here in the middle, loosely, I would say. But if you try to resize this, it's still a text shape. That's the right word. It's still a text box kind of. So it's got this baseline and this extra space that is designed for like Y's or P's or anything that has a descender kind of coming down. But I can take these two and actually convert them into shapes. So if I select those, I can go to type and create outlines. And this converts it. Now, of course, you'd want to make sure that you've got your font set, you've got everything spelled correctly, you've got the letters the way you want them. Because when I create an outline, it's then just going to convert these into shapes. So notice that now there's not a box with a line. It's actually, this is a circle grouped with a rectangle, basically is what I'm looking at. But doing that helps me because if I wanted to drag this up to where it matches the kind of lines up with the top of the H, and I'll just sort of show you while we're doing this. I was struggling with it the other day because if I put this here and then try to drag that up, notice that the bottom starts pulling up, so I didn't like that. So again, just converting it to outlines. I'm going to do both. Type, convert to outlines, and I can grab that one and pull that up. You can also kind of cheat a little bit with this, and if I wanted to make the H just a little bit broader, and I could center that there. If you want to break it up, I could put a white stroke around the I here, and then we get sort of a little separation between the H and the I. And so I wanted to show that when I thought it was just kind of a neat way to look at just using text. You can do that. And then, of course, out to the side or underneath, you could type out. If I grab my text tool and click here, anyway, so you could do, and whatever, I'm not sure what sort of fonts that they had there, and you can kind of play around with those, but um, just a thought there. And another one that I wanted to show was looking at the Google logo. So it's a G, but it's just divided up into different colors. And we'll just go ahead and use that G. Again, I'm going to go with just this open sans here. We'll do extra bold. I am not sure what font the Google G is. It probably is not a font. It is probably something that they paid lots of money for somebody to draw. And this is not going to look exactly like it, but I just want to use it kind of as an example. So basically, it's broken up into different colors. So if we convert this to a outline, so type, convert to outlines, then again, we have a shape that looks like a G. And I'm going to grab my line tool and just start kind of in the center, and I'm going to draw kind of straight out here. We'll do just a 45-degree angle here. And that gives me a line, and then I can use my rotate tool just like we did with those petals earlier. And I can click right there on the anchor point and hold down my Option key, drag this over. I think this is working right. It's again hard to see because I don't have a color on them. I should have applied that color so that you could see it a little bit better. Let's do black here. But now if I do Command D, no, it's not going to remember. So let me try that again. So I click on this, grab my rotation tool, click there on the anchor point, hold Option, and then just click and drag. And I'm holding Shift as well to hit just 45 degrees. And now I bet I could Command D to get that around. And then I'm just going to use these lines here to divide this. So using my Pathfinder, I can come in and divide. And so now we've got all these different little sections here. And now I can go in. If you don't want to ungroup, so if you'll look at the I over here, if I double click, so of course the G is still all grouped together in these pieces. But if I double click on it, it goes into what's called isolation mode. And if you look up here at the top, I'm now inside this group. And then I could select these different pieces. So if I wanted to do red, I'm going to make both of these red. So it's not just a little sliver. Yellow. We'll do a couple of yellow. So I probably could have just done less lines here the way I'm doing this. Green. And then we'll just make both of these blue. Yeah, I could have just done really 4 lines going up, down, left, and right, but that works. And then if I just double click away, now I'm back in this, so I can grab this and I can grab this. Oh, let's group those. All right. Another thing, just before I jump into the last thing that I wanted to mention, is that Illustrator is a vector-based program, which means that you don't have to worry about pixelation. So you don't have to worry about if you blow something up, is it going to look bad if I made this really small on a piece of paper, but now I need it to be really big on a poster. these are just shapes. And so as you make it bigger, it's just going to make it bigger and then fill in. But like if I zoom in super close to the meeting between these two, you'll see that there's not a pixelated line in between. It's actually just a solid, clean line. Same thing if I try to, so if I zoom in on this little diagonal line here, you'll see you don't see little steps. You know, if you got really close on a diagonal in Photoshop or on an image, you would see little jagged pixels here. It doesn't work with pixels, so it just works with these shapes, which makes it really great for this. So you can pull in a logo, you can make it as big as a billboard or as small as a business card, and it'll keep its resolution. Now, the last thing that I want to mention, and I'm going to zoom out by using Command 0 just to see where we are on our page here. And then I'm going to zoom in kind of to this bottom corner here. And I want to talk about the brush tool. So I saved this for last because I'm not very good with it, because I can't draw, and also I'm using a mouse and not a stylus or anything. But with this brush tool, this is the one that I use, and it is a martini glass. So I guess we're getting to that point in the afternoon that maybe it's okay to think about that. But if I click and drag, this is something that somebody taught me how to draw, and it's to test the limits of my ability. So you sort of do that, you do this, and then you draw the line here, and you can make a little glass shape. And then, of course, you can use this. You can do, you know, sort of hand-drawn swirls if you're good at doing that sort of thing, or especially, you know, sort of like waves. You can do all of that. You can, I can't draw, it's embarrassing, but if you do all that, so it creates these lines here, and they are just strokes. So if I select my little martini glass, I'm gonna try to center it here. You can then go into your brushes, and these are really cool, where you want to talk about making something look hand drawn when you actually didn't draw it yourself. You actually used a program to kind of help you figure it out. So these are some basic ones. So this little charcoal, it kind of gives you a charcoal effect there. But if you look at the bottom of this, there are some brush libraries. And I typically go into, and they're all great. And so you can kind of go in and look to see which ones you like. Borders are just that. They actually kind of like this denim stitch border here. Those are best for like ovals or rectangles that you're using to frame something. But these different brushes, like the artistic, and if I go into like ink, I think this is the one that I like here. If I go down and do this first one here, it sort of looks like a pen that's sort of running out of ink as it draws, so you get that sort of effect. Um, Selecting that again, if I do even just these that just taper off toward the end, so you get sort of kind of calligraphy looking strokes there. So really kind of neat, quick ways to play around with just lines to see if you like the way those look. There's one that looks almost kind of gives it a wood carving look. And you can adjust the stroke. So right now this is at 1 point, but sometimes with these you can even go down to these decimal weights here. So you get something like that. And then maybe even with the waves, if I go in and do this, you get something like that. And my little spiral. Oh, if I can get over here. So you get different effects. So the brushes are really cool, and they've got tons of them in here. Let's see some of these. So this actually, if we had just a line, so if I just drew a line in here and then chose one of these, you get these little kind of floral stems here. And so you can spend lots of time sort of pouring through those and seeing what you're looking for. Oh, and I also just realized I was looking at the timing of the recording, but realized that I started it late. So we're a little over time. But I'm able to stick around. If you've got any questions, again, let me zoom out just so that you can sort of see all of the things that I've sort of thrown together here in the workshop. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry for running over just a little bit, But if you have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great afternoon.